495 of the Lance Burkitt Encounter. Not really. It's episode 18. And here we are on the day, Friday the 27th of December 2024. Smack bang in between Christmas and New Year. Had a little bit of time to fill, so I thought I'd come and record an episode or two to catch up with the things that I've been wanting to do all year but not got round to. Now, I was going to do the old Chemical Skies episode today, but then I got watching some interviews and some stuff the last few days about this, should we call it an outbreak of UFOs across the United States predominantly. Why it always seems to be the United States escapes me. There could be a few reasons, I guess. But anyway, it seems that there's a lot of UFO stroke drone activity from around November this year in the US, which is seems to be not going away, which is interesting because normally you get a little bit of hullabaloo in the news, don't you? Remember a couple of years ago we had the go fast and the gimbal. I'm not sure if all of you guys are familiar with those terms, but if you just go on to any search engine of your choice and type in go fast UFO, click on videos, you can see it's the Department of Defense, I think's declassified UFOs from a decade ago or so, maybe 2 decades ago now, some of them. And same, you can type in gimbal UFO, gimbal UFO, and again you'll get, don't type in like that, again you'll get a bunch of videos, so you can look at those, but they're kind of pre-released and they're all kind of like fluffed up with statements and blah blah blah. And quite often with stuff like that, there's a little bit of, or the government had to kind of cover it up. There was a black ops, there was a budget, all that, and it gets washed away over a few months and years. And it's only kind of like the serious UFO buffs that keep into that and research it and bring it up often. But my feeling is the general public will have seen that and instantly forgot what it was. But it's still there on my radar. And then last few days, particularly the last few days, I've been watching some documentaries and podcasts and stuff about these UFOs that have shown up. Looks, I think, predominantly in the eastern United States, or I could be wrong. And people are kind of not sure if these are drones or planes or UFOs or ours or theirs, whoever theirs is. So I thought today we'd have a look at that. But the reason I want to bring that into the fore is because quite often what you see is statements like, oh my god, it's 2024 and that's the best video, or that's the best photograph, or the best whatever you could get of a UFO. Fake. And of course, it's really easy to photograph a moving object in the dark, isn't it? Well, it's not, and we'll go through that. But then we've got AI that's come into the picture recently. Are these fake AIs dead easy to do? But really what I wanted to do was to say, from a photography standpoint, having tried to photograph not UFOs but things like that, it's insanely difficult. Even if you've got time, equipment, and those luxuries and experience, still extremely difficult to get what you would call a good photo or a good video of any object, let alone something that's quite often in the distance, quite often blinking, quite often it's dark. These things is not easy, even if you've got experience and you've got all the kit. So I thought we'd talk about that a little bit, and I'll show you some of my examples, not of UFOs, but of similar things which are difficult to photograph even when you've got time, kit, space to do it. And then I guess, within that we'll talk a little bit about what these things possibly could be, why they could be. I'll give you my opinion on what I think they possibly are. But then maybe, once you've thought about all that, maybe you can go out and try and grab a few pictures of your own, be it of the stars, the planets, sun, moon, distant mountains, whatever it is, and see if you can get better pictures than what you see out there. So then if ever you have the opportunity to photograph unidentified flying object or unidentified, what does it call them now, aerial phenomena, or USO, unidentified submersive object, whatever they then you can maybe get a good enough picture to put it out there, and people won't be able to go, oh, it's fake, oh, it's AI, oh, why can't you make a better picture? That's crap. You can't be a professional photographer. So that's kind of like the general gist of this episode today, episode 18 of the Lance Burkitt Encounter. What should we call it? The UFO and drone phenomena. So I've spent the last couple of days dragging together some of my pictures, just to kind of collate a bunch of stuff to show you what I've done over the last decade or so as a photographer in trying to capture things which people think are easy to capture because they're sitting there, or they appear to be sitting there for a while, when actually they're not. And part of my wider kind of understanding of all this is those of you that have followed me from the start or know my work from elsewhere, particularly my academic work, will know that my reasoning has led me over the years to believe that we live in a simulation, a sophisticated holographic simulation. And what that further leads me to is that we all have seen optical illusions. We all see optical illusions every day, and quite often we don't notice it. And we have to kind of look at these things in a skeptical way, because quite often optical illusions are the thing that's making us think we're seeing what we're seeing. When I think quite often there's an easy explained or easily explainable reason for what you think you're seeing when you're not, because we live in a holographic reality which is based pretty much off optical illusions. And we're kind of like nurtured, if you like, to believe what we see. But my experience, having investigated that, and the reality of that is quite often we're seeing what we believe we're being taught to see, and it's not necessarily the case that we are actually seeing what you think you're seeing. And if you're into photography at all, into any depth, you'll often realise that optical illusions can be a pain in the arse. From simple things like lens distortion, right the way through to the angle you've seen something at, the reflection of it, all those kind of wondrous things. Light, the human eye only sees, what is it, 0.000% of the visible spectrum, and if you're trying to record that and the device you're recording it on doesn't see that either, quite often that amalgamation of your poor eyesight and the capture device's poor capturingness might lead you to see something you've not seen or believe. I mean, an obvious one is when people see ghosts in reflections or ghosts in the clouds. I mean, there's a term, isn't there, for that, for seeing faces and things. I think the experts reckon that humans are pre-wired to see faces and everything. I'm not quite sure how true that is, but again, optical illusions are just there. So try to take what you've seen, or you think you've seen, with your own eyes with a pinch of salt, because trust me, the more you look into things, the more you realise optical illusions are literally in your everyday life. They're everywhere you go, everywhere you look, everything you see, and everything that's presented to you. And sometimes those illusions are presented to you in an honest way, and sometimes they're not. They're presented in a way to hoodwink you. And I think sometimes, particularly when you're looking at UFO videos and pictures, there's always somebody out there looking for their payday, isn't there? And there's always a government department out there looking to make you look over there when you should be looking over there. So we'll get into that a little bit as we talk through them, but I just thought we'd start by talking about how difficult it is to photograph something that you see all the time. And I thought we'll start with something really simple. An example I'll bring up on the screen now. This planet here. So hopefully you can see on the screen now. I've got a picture of a planet up. Now about, 2015-16, I thought, I've always had an interest in the stars and what it really is, what's out there, what's in there, what is it all. So I started looking, and I got myself a 5-inch Celestron telescope, and the Barlow adapter, and stuck my 5D at the time on there and started taking pictures of the moon, sun, the sun, stars, planets. And even with a 5-inch scope, which I think equated to about, the size of the scope equated to about a 1200mm zoom. And 1200mm zoom is great. But what non-photographers won't realise is at 1200mm, every single little thing shakes. Can you see my friend Bobblehead here? Del boy. You see how he's constantly shaking? Even when everything's perfectly still, he's constantly shaking. And at 1200mm zoom, your camera's doing the same. Whether it's a bit of wind, whether you've just trod on the ground nearby, whether you've farted, trust me, it will make that camera shake. So when you're trying to photograph something that's a tiny little dot in the sky, that actually sometimes the planets and stars can look quite bright and quite big to the human eye. They don't look like that to a camera or to a 1200mm lens. So, you know, I'm setting up now. I always struggle with my telescope. It's an electronic telescope, and it's got the predetermined coordinates and stuff in it. So theoretically, you can set it up and tell it to follow anything from anywhere. But I could never get that bug. I don't know if I just didn't have the patience. So more often than not, when I was looking for planets and stars and stuff, I would eyeball them. I'd get them by eye, get them in frame. So I couldn't follow them very well. I could only follow them by manually moving the telescope with them, and that's a bit clunky. So quite often on my videos of my planets, stars, moon, things are moving because I could never get the bloody telescope to move with it. I've seen people that can much better, but I never had the time or the arseness to do that. So my videos are quite often a bit shaky and quirky. But once you've got, the lens set on a planet, let's say for example Saturn. I think this one's Saturn. Saturn's got rings, hasn't it? Jupiter. It's there in view. Now when you look through a viewfinder, you can see it very clear, exceptionally clear. It's only probably, a couple of degrees most of arc in the viewfinder, but you can see it well enough to see the detail. And if you're looking at the Saturn and the rings, you can see the rings. You can see the moons around Jupiter, and it's quite clear when you're looking through it. So, bit of trial and error, you get the camera set up because you're not sure what the aperture is. You've got a 5-inch scope that's an aperture equivalent. You're trying to get a fast shutter. You don't want to use much ISO because you don't want the noise if you can help it. And eventually, you get to a point where you think you're going to get a clear shot. And if we just look at the EXIF data for this, let's see what we shot at. Canon 5D Mark III. 1/200th of a second, ISO 256. So that must have been because it was, even with a 5-inch scope, we're not talking a lot of light coming in there. 1/200th of a second. I must have gone faster, but couldn't have got it any faster because clearly, if I'm at 25600 ISO, I ain't getting much more shutter in that. So if you look at how it's in the sky, I'm pre-planned. I've got a professional scope. I've got a professional camera. I've got rough settings. 200th of a second. It's blink of an eye. It should be quick enough to freeze it. I've made sure that it's not windy. I'm nowhere near it. I'm using a remote release, and still, all I get is that. Now that's been cropped. How big is the file now? Image size 1086 pixels across. So even at that magnitude, the original file would have been about 5,000 pixels, I think, across. So it's like 20% as big as what it should be in the screen, and that's all you get with that professional bit of kit. So it's not much, and you can see as you move in, you can see more detail. You can see colours. You can see bands. You can see the crescent. Some of that will be colour and lens distortion because of the kit that I'm using. Some of it will be the white balance might have been off. But that's a planet that you can see through the telescope quite clearly. But try and take a picture of it, even at 200th of a second on a very, very calm day with a remote shutter. The amount of vibration off that shutter going, mirror locked up, the amount of vibration causes it to be fuzzy, because it doesn't look like that through the lens when you're taking the shot. And if we reduce it down, look, never gets any better. So that's what you're going to get with that kind of kit. Canon 5D, professional quality telescope, Celestron. I think they call it NXE or NX5 SE, something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. That's all you can get through it without any additional magnification. So I think I'm using a Barlow 1.25 inch Barlow adapter. That's how you connect the camera to the telescope. So, you know, when you're sitting there going, oh, that's a shit picture, that's not very good, that's God, this day and age, can't you get better than that? Of course you can get better than that. But with that kind of entry-level kit that I got, that's not even entry-level. I've got using a Pro camera, kind of 5D, and I'm using a Pro telescope, 5-inch telescope, and that's the best I can get. So, let's say, for example, you've got something in the sky that's whizzing past you, that's not as far away as that, perhaps, but looks as small as that in the sky, and you've got a split second, even with professional kit, to find it, set up, take some shots. What's the chances of you getting it sharp, in focus, correctly exposed, or somewhere nearly exposed? Pretty crap, to be fair. And I'll show you an example video of this. A couple of years ago, I was following the ISS, the International Space Station, whatever that is and wherever it's supposed to be, and I thought I'm gonna photograph this, but it's a tiny little blip in the sky. And you can see on the screen where I've got the little red circle where it's going to appear in the clouds, going from, this is looking west, so it's kind of like northwest to southwest. And you'll see a little white dot up here. You see that there? Now that's the ISS, International Space Station. And this is one of the reasons why I'm always very sceptical when you see photographer photographs, clear picture of the ISS transgressing the moon or the sun. I'm thinking, oh, a lot of bollocks. So this is a 24-105mm lens at full width. So this is zoomed in 200%. So you can see the stars in the background, and you can see the ISS or whatever it is, hot air balloon for all I know, going where the app said it was going to go. And it took about 7 or 8 minutes, I think, to transverse the sky. So this is 6 short segments of that. Looks like an aeroplane where it's blinking. I don't know why it blinks. It's probably the reflection or refraction or some other action. And that's 1,000 times zoomed in. So, even at a time and a place where I knew, sorry, that's the 1,000 zoom there. Even at a time and a place where I knew this thing was going to be in the sky, where it was going, roughly how fast it was going, with a digital DSLR camera, 24-105 lens, set at 24mm. That's the best I can get of that. Now we can see it in the sky, we can see it going from right to left, we can work out how fast it's going probably. But other than that, it's just a dot in the sky. And that's me sitting up. I mean, it probably took about 20 minutes of footage before it came into view, just making sure I got it. And it doesn't matter how much you zoom in, you never see anything better than that white dot going across the sky. Now you could argue that I could have used this. I could have tried it with the telescope. I could have done, but I wasn't exactly quite sure which piece of sky it was going to appear in. And then I'm tracking it with the telescope. There's no way at 1200mm you can handhold and track it, because you'll just be shaking like, shaking like the proverbial shitting dog, as they say. And there's no way I would have ever got it in focus or in frame. So you're left using the motor, which is left, right, up and down. And it's quite jerky, so it would have been in and out of frame doing that. And I'm not sure, even at 1200mm, given what I saw from the planets, I can't remember if it's Saturn or Jupiter, that one, what you get in a still photo, and looking at what you get in this video, if I bunch it on to there again, 1,000 times 24mm, how much even at 1200mm you'll get in terms of detail. So just thinking about that, I knew what it was, I knew where to look, I knew what to set the camera up. I'm shooting through a window, so I'm losing a bit of clarity. So I guess I'm on a hill, it's pitch black, I've got twice the zoom I've got, still getting, let's say I've got 4 times the zoom I've got, let's say I've got something that can track it technically. You see the pictures you see of the ISS, let's say, against the moon or against the sun, or clear as day. I'm not convinced any of that's real. Happy to be proven wrong. But I think if we're judging it by how difficult it is to photograph a moving target, that you know where it is, you know what it's called, you know what it's supposed to be doing and where it's going. That's the best I could get with my professional experience and professional kit. And if we just then equate that to looking at where has it gone? I must have marked put it in the other folder. So here's a picture of an aeroplane, an Etihad Airways aeroplane, and I've kind of over processed this so you can see it. So that's on a Canon 7D that was taken with an old FD lens off an FD camera with an adapter, and it's equates to 900mm. So at 900mm, even at 900mm, I'm still only getting 1,000 pixels in the frame there. However high that plane was, 30,000 feet or whatever it would have been at over land, 20,000 feet maybe. So again, I was watching, I knew the plane was coming, I had time to follow it, time to zoom in, time to capture it. It's a bit soft because it's a shitty old lens, but I got the picture. And yes, you can see it's a plane, you can see it's a Etihad Airways plane. And that's in good daylight, with a decent piece of kit, knowing exactly where it's going to be. Yep. So imagine, I mean, how big is that? What's that, a 737 maybe? Or the same kind of size. So imagine how big that aeroplane is, sat on the ground. Imagine something half that size or a quarter that size going that fast or faster, and I'm trying to catch up with it with a 900mm lens, handheld, and trying to capture it in good daylight. Chances of me getting a real good clear photograph that proves what I'm looking at is real, excluding all optical illusions. Looks solid, looks like it's flying, looks like it's a aerial phenomenon of some kind. What's the chances of me getting it in focus, correctly exposed, usable, not laughable, and proving to people what I've seen? I think it's highly unlikely that even in that scenario I would not get what you might call usable pictures. And again, if I just look at this one here of the helicopter, which I took recently, just saw it coming over the house, so I picked up the camera. So I shot this on the Canon 7D with an 18-135 lens, so that's 135mm on a crop sensor, and that helicopter is probably about 300 feet in the air, maybe 400 feet. Moving target. Yep, you can tell it's an helicopter. We're getting some rotor movement, but you can tell what it is. But again, I had a couple of minutes to hear it coming, get the camera, set it up, see it come overhead. But it's not what you'd call pin sharp or beautiful. We just happen to know what an helicopter looks like, so we can identify it quite easily. Chances of that happening in the UFO scenario, daylight, photographer with a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, something with a decent lens on it, being there. It's doable, but I think it's not as doable as what the general public think it is. I don't think it's as easy or as it's not going to happen that easily, is it? People aren't going to be hanging around waiting for this stuff to happen. I'm a bit of a pillock. I've always got my camera on standby because we get quite a lot of air traffic over our house, particularly helicopters and stuff, and I'm always nosing to see what the authorities are going up to, particularly the army and whatnot. So I'm kind of always ready to roll in that respect. Unfortunately, I've never seen anything UFO like. But I mean, you know, that's quite a big helicopter as well. I mean, I don't know how big that is really. It's probably 40 feet long, is it? 40 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet. It's not small. So even with the mobile phone, you'd be able to probably see what that was if you did a little bit of digital zoom. So it's not like everything's difficult to capture. But here again, I'm talking good daylight. I'm prepared. I know what's coming. I know roughly what camera settings to put it on. I can capture that pretty easily. And if we look at something bigger, something that's easier to see, but terribly difficult to photograph, we'll look at the moon. I love the moon. I've always had a fascination with the moon, and I've really enjoyed over the years reading about all its kind of quirks and its idiosyncrasies. I mean, my favourite one is that it was never there originally. If you go back to folklore and stories passed down, particularly to African tribes, I think, and stuff like that, you'll find that the moon never used to be there. It was put there by some people who didn't have our best interests at heart, shall we say, some millennia ago, and caused a lot of chaos, and it kind of, that's what it does today. Scientists will tell you that it's the thing that keeps our tides moving around. Other people have all sorts of fascinations with the moon. Part of my holographic theory is that the moon is also holographic. I'll not get into that today, but there's loads of information out there about that. Some people think you can see through it at certain times. It's not a solid body. Other people say when scientists dropped a bomb on it, it rang like a bell for minutes and minutes, so it's hollow. Some people say it's a hollow spaceship. There's all sorts of wondrous things about the moon. But for me, looking at it for 53 years and wondering where it could be led me to start photographing it a few years back. And I could never really afford the kind of like the 20 grand lenses to do this to any degree. So I always used to use couple 100mm crop, that kind of stuff. And I've never to this day got a photograph of the moon that I was satisfied with. But again, I've got some nice pictures of the moon, but nothing I would ever kind of like sell as being an amazing moon picture. So when I got the telescope, I thought I'm gonna photograph this fucking moon with my scope, and I'm gonna show everybody. Until you realise then that it ain't that easy either. Now it's easy to expose the moon. It's easy to get the camera trained and focused on it. What it's not easy to do is to get it pin sharp, because of the nature of my telescope and the aperture it presents and the softness that comes with that. As you can see from this picture, you know it's in focus. But when you look through it with your eye, it looks great. But when you put the camera on it, it's not quite as in focus and as sharp as you'd like to be. So I was very frustrated with that. But it did allow me to see it close up. And you can see the moon's moving, or we're moving, whichever way you want to look at it. It's not a static object. And to get it still for any amount of time is difficult. And again, when you're looking at a telescope with quite a big aperture and around 1200mm zoom, any slight vibration is gonna, smeg it up. It's gonna make it look soft, blurred. And obviously, if you're shooting through the atmosphere as well, you've got all those kind of things to kind of plug into to think. You see, it's starting to go out of frame now, and you'll have seen a bird go across that before. Just happened chance. But I found it frustrating videoing and photographing the moon for those reasons I just mentioned. And if I've got one here, I bet I've not put one in now. I got some close-up versions of the moon, which I did of it years. I'm not sure if I'm putting it in here, but you can see that it's soft. It's in focus. You can tell it's the moon. You can tell what I'm doing, but it's soft. But again, it's frustrating to photograph because I want to be able to see it like you can see it on those YouTube videos and like on Sky at night, and it's just very difficult to do that. So I tended to kind of shoot it as an object in the blue sky. So I love it just floating in the sky. When you get dawn and dusk and you get it floating in the sky. And again, We'll cover some of that in another video. But so the moon's quite easy to photograph. What's not perhaps easy to photograph is detail on the moon. I mean, that's quite a you'll never see the moon that big in the sky with your eye. And I did notice when I first got into this, I did wonder why. Whenever you're looking at the moon, you're coming up a hill and the moon's in, it's massive. You get your phone out and it becomes a dot. I did look into why that was, and to this day I've not seen an explanation as to why you can't photograph the moon how it appears. Yeah, I've never seen a plausible explanation as to why the moon looks bigger to the eye than to the camera. I'm sure some smart Alex got the real answer, but anyway, it's relatively easy to photograph. It's not so relatively easy to get it smack in the frame looking massive, unless you've got super lens. And so just photographing generally stuff in the night sky, the moon's the easiest thing to do if you know your settings. F11, couple of hundredths of a second, limited ISO will get you a nice, exposed picture of the moon, particularly when it's bright. But outside of that, the stars, the planets, particularly in isolation, are a lot more tricky to photograph than one might think. And this is a still I took off the back of a camera of Saturn with its rings, as you can see. That's a 10 times zoom, so I'm actually filming that live. I've zoomed in on the camera 10 times, and that's how it appears there. Can't get an actual photograph off the camera that clear though, because as soon as you push the shutter, we get shake, we lose clarity, and that's another big frustration for me. Again, this is a JPEG, so you can see the planet and its 3 moons: Jupiter, Ganymede, is it Titan, all those. So just photographing stuff that looks relatively close. Here's Mars, for example, and again, when you look through the scope, you can see it quite clearly. You can see it's a planet, but when you take a picture, there's that minuscule amount of vibration with the mirror locked up. Just that little shutter going is enough to cause blur and distortion, and that's cropped, and that's the best I could ever get of Mars using the 5-inch Celestron scope and a Barlow adapter and a 5D, 7D, 6D. So as I was saying before, I've tended to stick to doing more scenic pictures of the moon because it's easier to place them than it is to faff about. Again, it's also for courses, and if you've got better kit, you'll get better pictures. But going back to our original thread for today on the UFOs, or the drones, what are they? I think because most of the footage you see is shaky, out of focus, poorly exposed, I think that can be excused, because I think even someone like me that kind of knows what I'm doing, I'm not the best astrophotographer, not the best aeroplane photographer, but I've got enough experience to be able to get a shot, as you saw of the plane, as you saw of the helicopter. But things further out are a little bit trickier. Things further away, things which move in more obscure ways, are a bit more difficult. That's a triptych of the 3 planets: Saturn, Mars, Jupiter. All probably, I can't remember off the top of my head, probably about 400 or 500% size of what I actually got on camera. So they would be a little bit sharper, but again, 5-inch scope, DSLR camera, that's the best I could get. So let's imagine I'm at home tonight, I'm in my back garden, I'm doing some stargazing, I'm photographing the moon, I'm photographing the stars or the planets, and the UFO appears. Even when I'm set up and ready to go, the chances of me getting a wow picture of that is very, very, very slim, because there's no way I'm going to tripod it and try and follow it on a tripod. There's no way handheld I'm going to be able to track that and keep it perfectly safe. I'll get something, but what it would be, who knows. This video here is me tracking Venus with a DSLR, trying to get it in focus. So obviously I'm pointing at it, I'm trying to catch it, I can't get it in focus. See how it just disappeared? Couldn't even do that. Saturn and Jupiter. Again. Watch this. Trying to get them in the shot and then get them in focus. That's me moving the focusing ring, which is knocking the telescope about all over the place. I think this might have been shot with a mirror on, so it's upside down and back to front. Doesn't really matter, but you can see me trying to get them into focus, and then electronically moving the tripod, the telescope about to try and get them back in shot. Extremely difficult. I know where they are. I know where they're going. See, it's nearly in focus now. Difficult, frustrating. So you can imagine, can't you? Even the guy with the proper kit and all the idea, UFO comes into shot. Oh shit! And unless it stays there for an hour, then I could say, yeah, we should be seeing some better shots than we perhaps do see. But if it's there for a few minutes or a few seconds, the chances of getting really high quality usable pictures, I think, are pretty slim. So I think we ought to give people a break who are trying to photograph these things. Particularly when you build into the fact that people aren't ready, they're probably a bit afraid. They probably don't want to be seen as being stupid. All those things are going through your head. You're probably not very clear, or you're not thinking clearly. I've done it myself when I've been asked to photograph something quickly. Set the camera up wrong, missed it, and that's just normal stuff. Kicking a football. Quick, there's that thing happening there. Oh, missed it. So you can imagine in that situation when you've got a UFO flopping about. Even the more experienced people might flap or might not quite get it right and end up with something that's not that usable. I think we have to forgive them, and I think most of the time you've got to think people are using these things, which are next to useless. And I'll show you why they're useless, because a couple of Sundays back I went to see the fabulous Paul McCartney. You know Paul McCartney of the Beatles fame. My lovely wife Kirsty paid for me on my birthday to go to see Mr. McCartney in Manchester, and it was great, but I wanted to sneak in my DSLR, nice Pro Series lenses, but it wasn't going to happen. So I had to make do with the old Samsung plastic lens piece of rubbish. But what I did is I shot a lot of stuff in the phone. I thought I'll get it home and maybe I'll run it through Topaz, see if it can clean it up a little bit. Knowing in the back of my mind that was living in dream world. But again, it just shows you how when somebody's using a mobile phone to photograph something, even if it's well lit, even if they've got time, the results are going to be dog shit. So here's Mr. McCartney on stage. This is shot with a Samsung Galaxy 21 Ultra, S21 Ultra. So you can see when you look at this on the phone, it looks great, but when you look at it on a decent sized screen, it suddenly becomes oh. So I'm using the 10 times built in there. It goes up to about 120 times zoom, but that's just dog shit. This is about 10 or 15 times zoom, I think. That's probably the best one that I got. So let's just have a look at that. 2514. This one here. Let's have a look at this and have a little zoomy. Here we go, look. Let's view actual size. Look at that. So you can imagine if Sir Paul there is a UFO floating about and we're trying to zoom in, handheld, shaking like a shitting dog, trying to get our exposure right as a going, and the UFO's going, look at that idiot there on his Samsung. The chances of you getting something really usable, poor, I think. And if we take something slightly out of context, let's look at one which got more than one person in it. Let's have a look see if this one's got one with his bandmates in. Yeah, let's have a look. So I mean, clearly I was focusing on Paul because that's the picture I was trying to get. But if we look at 100%, I mean, look how poor his bandmates look. Do you know what I mean? They're just blobs of pixels, not even pixels, are they? Teddy Bear's not bad. But, yeah. If you take this guy in isolation, if you didn't know who he was, would you be able to identify him? No. So people using mobile phone tech to photograph UFOs, USOs, UPOs, IFOs, whatever they call them these days, you're not going to get anything that which would probably, you would say, will be believable. There are only always going to be dots in the sky. It's very unlikely that they're going to be anything more than dots in the sky. And I'll when I get home, I'll dig out and see if I've got a phone shot of me taking a picture of the stars or whatever. I probably have got one somewhere. If I do, I'll insert it here, and you'll be able to see that using a phone to photograph anything other than somebody stood next to you is crap. If I can't find it, I'll go back to talking to you. And so, you know, my thoughts on using mobile phones or anything really to photograph these supposed UFOs is, it's a bit of a non-starter. We can't say we don't believe it because your picture's shit, because the truth is, I think unless we get extremely lucky and somebody knows in advance where these things are going to be, we're going to get shit pictures. So just thinking about what they could be, I mean, I live my life on a simple premise. And if you live by this premise, you'll never go far wrong. And that simple premise is everybody in authority default lies to you. So the government, whoever's in charge of these stories, the media, or whoever's in charge of media, everybody's default lying to you, either to control you or to make you buy more stuff. And I think if we take this splurge of UFO sightings since November and look at it through that lens, excuse the pun, I don't think we'll be far wrong in terms of figuring out what's really going on. 9 times out of 10, in fact 10 times out of 10, when the government are going, look at this, oh my God, look at this, what you should really be doing is looking here, looking here, looking here, because they're always doing it to distract you from something. Given what the governments of the world did to us in the last 4 years, in a lockstep way, something probably else is going on in the background, and that these are a distraction for. Now, some of the things I've read over the last few days, one of them is there are lots of government drones which are looking for a potential nuclear weapon that went missing from some naval yard or some base. How any superpower could lose a nuclear bomb is kind of slightly beyond me, so I'm not quite sure that's possibly more of a cover story, or there's a false flag coming up and that's what's going to be the reasoning for it. I saw President Trump on telly saying that the government knows what they are, doesn't know why they're not telling us. He's the incumbent president. Is he going to tell us in January? I doubt it, because I don't know if you've noticed, but these actual world leaders aren't leaders in anything. They're just puppets for the real power behind them. Talking of which, I read the other day that with trillions and trillions of pounds in debt, I think if we follow the money, follow where that trillions of pounds of debt leads us to, you'll have all the answers to everything in your life. So I don't think Mr. Trump's going to tell us what's really going on. He can indicate at things now, but he's not going to tell us. Although somebody did say that he'd been told to stay away from the golf course. Maybe that's where they're going to land next, on his golf course. Could they be Chinese drones? It's possible, I guess. They always work on the theory, don't they, that even the government's tech is 100 years or whatever in front of what we know. I mean, some of the drones you see now are great. The drone displays you see, they can paint pictures in the sky. That links us into something called Project Blue Book. If you've not heard of that, Project Blue Book was a ongoing project in the States where they're going to use light and sound technology to make people think something was happening. For example, the second coming. For example, an alien invasion. Was it one of the Marvel films that was it the Spider-Man Homecoming, Coming Home, or whatever it was called? They had a kind of heads up as to what they could do with drones. It's basically a fake alien invasion or a fake something using drones, light show, sound and tech to confuse people into thinking what they're seeing is true. Back to the optical illusions again. And when you're thinking about optical illusions, think about audio illusions as well, because they're just as prevalent. So is it something to do with that? Are people really seeing drones? Are they things really there? Are they just light shows? Is it a test? If it's an intelligence test like the last one that humanity failed, we don't stand very much of a chance, do we? But I think whatever these things really are, they're to keep us talking about them while something else is going on. Well, that something else is, I don't know. It could be anything with our World Economic Forum sponsored governments across the world. It could be absolutely anything. All I do know is these things tend to happen for a reason, and let's look at it logically. If there really was an aerial threat to the United States, would it be on CNN every night? Because part of the government's modus operandi is to protect us. They like to let us know that they're protecting us. So if you look at anything, problem, reaction, solution. Here's a problem, here's our reaction, here's a solution. Everybody's safe, thanks government. So if it was a real threat, they could deal with, they would have done that already. They would have told us the problem, had the reaction, given us a solution. They haven't done that. These things are still just popping up. So that tells me that there's something else afoot, and they're either a distraction for that something else or they're a build up to that something else. I think if it was aliens, I think if it was your traditional alien that's come from outer space, flown a million light years to go to America like they always do, and then hop around on the East Coast for months. Not quite sure what that would be for, or whether the intelligence that's behind that would even think about doing that. You might not believe this, because if you speak to my friends and family, they'll all tell you I'm a ufologist and I believe in aliens. I don't in the traditional sense. What I believe in is we live in a holographic universe, and part of that universe lives alongside other universes, a multiverse if you like. And if these beings exist or whatever they are, they float between realities, because we're not solid, we're energy, and energy can change its wavelength and move between things. A little bit like, I think, when somebody dies and you see their ghost, that's what it is. It's their energy pattern manifest in a different way. So I think if there are aliens there, that's kind of what they would be, interdimensional rather than intergalactic, if that makes sense. But I think, again, if you've got the capability, if you're aware of what reality is and you can understand it and manipulate it, are you going to come through into our reality and dance around in the sky? Unlikely, isn't it? So if you just Google UFO drones USA, because some people are saying the drones, that they're our drones or that they're drones or whatever, you get all sorts of stuff coming up where people haven't got a clue. And you always get the whistleblowers, don't you? Former Pentagon official this lid, a mystery UFO drone sighting, shocking UFO revenue. You always get that kind of stuff. But it's all distraction, isn't it, from what's really going on. And what is really going on, I don't know. But I do hope some photographer out with the kit and the time and the effort to stand and wait for this to happen can get one. But then, would you believe him or her? Would they be subject to a visit from the Men in Black and have their stuff confiscated and never see that again? Probably. Would they be ridiculed by some setup? Probably. It's a difficult one, isn't it? To kind of like ping through. All I do know is that I've looked at a lot of UFO cases over time, everything from Billy Meyer to Travis Walton to that lovely old couple in the US who are probably the most believable. Project Blue Book with Alan Hynek and all that stuff. I've been into it all for years, looked at it all. And I can't say there aren't any truths because the photographs don't exist, because I know how difficult it is to photograph things. Never mind things that happen upon you, scare the life out of you, and you lose your wits when you're trying to do it. So photographic evidence isn't there, I think, for simple reasons that the people who had the opportunity to photograph them didn't have the skills, equipment, or lost their minds a little bit and weren't able to. I don't think it's because, I mean, clearly there are some that are fitted up. There are some clear fakes, hoaxes, a bit like the Loch Ness Monster stuff. But then I think, hey, how good would that be to photograph the Nessie? And will people believe that either? So I think what we need to do is just be very sceptical and keep our minds open, keep our hearts open, and just watch it with a critical eye and come to conclusions. Start from the basics of everybody lies, particularly governments and media companies. And if you can break through the lie and think logically about what it might really be, the conclusion is probably a bit more earthly, or the actual thing's probably a bit more earthly than we'd like it to be. I know, what's his name, Stephen Greer, who I don't quite know whether he's a charlatan or not. I like to think he's not. Some people think he is. He seems to think that we've got all this tech because we back engineered stuff, and these are ours that we see floating about, not theirs. It's us, it's the government that's going to do a false flag and scare the shit out of people. And this is kind of like the prelude to that. Could be right. The truth is, we just don't know. I guess the biggest takeaway from this today is don't trust your eyes. Tend to say go with your gut feeling. Your gut feeling's right more often than not. Don't trust your eyes and ears. Use some critical thinking. And if you come across something that you think looks genuine, let's have a look. Share it with me. I'll chat about it on the show. So that's it from me today. That was a bit quick, I know. I like to normally do a bit more than that. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed my discussion. I'll get another one in before the new year. Got a bit of time before the new year. But other than that, have a great Friday afternoon, or whatever day you're watching this, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.